I wanted to start today with a quote. So if you don't know, the topic of today is patriotism. And there's a quote I wanted to read, and I wanted to see if anybody knew who came up with this quote, or who said this quote. So the quote is, when you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice. Does anyone know who said that?
Donald Trump said this morning at the inauguration.
Donald Trump said that this morning.
Say it again.
So yeah, now, right, you have to reevaluate it, right? Yeah, he said it today. So when you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice. So we could probably take an hour just to unpack that statement in and of itself. But the idea of patriotism and the concept of patriotism is such an interesting topic. And we're really excited today to bring you 6 filmmakers who have tackled this subject for Sundance Now and a Sundance Now original show called Take 5, A More Perfect Patriotism. So Sundance Now is a streaming service. It is a terrific combination of movies, documentaries, and original series. You can sign up for Sundance Now right here in the headquarters. We have brand ambassadors all over. They will give you all the information on it, answer any questions. It's a really exciting service. We're incredibly proud of it. And we're really excited to bring you Take 5, the second season of Take 5, A More Perfect Patriotism. We are going to have our panel moderated today by a tremendous figure in the documentary community. Tom Powers is the co-founder of Doc NYC. He is the documentary programmer for the Toronto International Film Festival. He hosts his own podcast called Pure Nonfiction, and he's also a curator for Sundance Now. So Tom will be moderating, and we look forward to a really lively discussion. So come on up, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the people on Facebook Live. About 5 years ago, the folks at AMC Networks invited me to curate a collection of documentaries for this new subscription VOD channel, Sundance Now. At that time, I was one person working at this brand. Now we've got a big staff of dozens of people, and last year started really getting into producing more original content. Last year we were here with our first series of Take 5 filmmakers. So the Take 5 concept is to pick terrific documentary filmmakers. We give them an overarching theme. Last year the theme was justice. This year the theme is patriotism. And we really rely on their strengths as filmmakers to shape where they want to take that idea. And this year we have 6 filmmakers taking on this theme of patriotism. You're going to meet them all in a moment. But first, let's watch a sizzle reel that'll give you a little flavor of these works in progress. Here it is, Take 5.
A patriot is someone that loves their country. And an activist is someone who stands up for something even when it may not be popular.
Who are Americans? What is America? We are every color, every faith, every gender, every sexuality expression, every kind of human being ever born in one country.
Just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean you should do it. And I really struggle with that.
He was only 19 years old. He wanted to do his job.
American lives are not more important than other people's lives.
I don't know a lot, but I do know that I catch a lot of flack for expressing my opinions.
Don't believe what they say about the Tea Party. We're about fiscal responsibility, constitutionally limited governments, and free markets.
When 9/11 happened, I remember dealing with the tragedy like any other American, and then at the same time feeling that, you know, my patriotism was in question.
These are the conversations that need to take place. And often the conversations that need to happen are the ones that are most uncomfortable and tough to talk about.
The only real patriots are those who are fighting to get us closer to the beauty of the dream.
Congress should be dependent upon the people alone, not the rich more than the poor, not the learned more than the ignorant. James Madison. It's basically what I've been talking about.
He wouldn't be doing this if he didn't want the country he lives in to do better. So I guess by definition, Colin Kaepernick is a patriot.
If we let our government infringe on certain rights because it's non-patriotic, just imagine what could happen.
In the name of humanity!
I'm going to be optimistic, but it's difficult to predict what will happen.
Somebody has to challenge these symbols.
All right, now I'm going to let the team set the chairs behind me before I bring our filmmakers to stage. But you're the first audience to see that. It was just finished a couple days ago. These filmmakers have been working on these pieces for the last several weeks and months. They're going to be coming out later, probably in the next couple months. Stay tuned for Sundance Now to find out more. But we're going to hear the filmmakers talk a little bit about what each of their pieces are and what brought them to the subject and how they chose to interpret the subject. So if we've got all our chairs and all our water bottles, filmmakers, come on up and take some seats and I'll make some introductions. Please welcome the Take 5 filmmakers. All right, so I'm going to start at the very end. Ruzan Gagliini, I'm going to start with the toughest name for me to pronounce. Ruzan is the only filmmaker on stage who did a Take 5 last year for our Justice series. She did a wonderful piece called Limbo about people waiting for bail. And Ruzan now is working as a contributor for Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. She collaborated with Samantha Bee correspondent Ashley Black for this piece, this patriotism piece for Take 5. So Ruzan, can you tell us a little bit more about how you approach this topic?
Sure. Actually, Ashley ended up not working on this one.
Oh, okay.
But no, quick update.
Thank you for my briefer.
Yeah. Ashley's great. Hi, Ashley. I hope you're having fun at inauguration. Yeah, so we basically decided to make a movie about what it means to be a patriot now. And so I was just thinking about it when, Joyce and Owen called, and I kind of thought, it seems like right now all of America thinks that the government's not working for them. And in my opinion, what is more patriotic than giving the government back to the people? And there are all these people who are trying to do that in a really boring way. And these are the people who are working to get money out of politics. So I wanted to shine a light on the people who are working actively every day to try, within the system, to do something and give kind of America back to Americans. And I wanted to highlight it. We kind of talked to someone from the Tea Party and someone from the far left to kind of see if they both felt that way, if this was something we could come to the table together about as Americans. And it ended up being that the Tea Party person and the socialists were finishing each other's sentences. So I guess yes.
There's hope for building bridges.
Maybe.
All right, sitting next to Ruzan is Jahan Nujaim. She is a longtime attendee to the Sundance Film Festival with her films Startup.com, Control Room, and The Square that was nominated for an Academy Award about Tahrir Square and the protests in Egypt. Jahan right now is living with her family back in Egypt where she grew up. Jahan, can you tell us what your piece is about? When they came to you and asked you to do a piece on patriotism, how did you approach this?
So I am making my piece on the global patriot, which made a lot of sense for me when they approached me about taking this topic. I was thrilled because somebody growing up between Egypt and the US, often not feeling like I belong any place, it seemed like the right film to be making. But it's such a vast topic, such an important topic right now, has been discussed for so many years by so many great minds, and from from Martin Luther King, who says an injustice anywhere, an injustice one place is an, oh my God, I'm messing up this quote. You know this quote that I'm talking about. Injustice one place is an injustice everywhere. That's not exactly right, but close. And other great thinkers like him, Elie Wiesel, the opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And so the piece was really trying to think about what different people have said in the past, where we are now as global patriots, the interconnectivity between the struggles around the world, which I felt very strongly about when I was making the square. And as we were making the square, we had protests erupting around the world, people overtaking squares in different parts of the world. Our film was shown in a square in Kiev, and the protesters were talking with each other. So this topic has been important to me for a very long time, and the way that I decided to address it was to go to another fellow, a friend of mine who's a poet, and he writes poetry and aphorisms, many of which have dealt with this topic, and also to approach an animator. So I'm working with a poet and an animator to address this topic, which is not anything I've ever done before.
All right, well, you're always looking to take on new challenges. I know that about you. Next to Jahan is Kieran Deal. She is a stand-up comic in one part of her life. She made a documentary short called Woman Rebel about a Nepalese rebel, am I right? Yeah. Okay, so. Kieran, how did you approach this topic?
I started in documentary with Woman Rebel that HBO did, and then
stand-up comedy had a lot more money in it.
Right, just wanted a ball out of control. That was really the goal. But I think I was really exhausted by, when I look on like my Facebook feed, I just saw so much anger and like vitriol, and there's just such a negative energy and polarization, like just in the culture. And one of the things I think is great about comedy is that it's very unifying. So I was like, how can you use levity and intimacy to kind of tell a story from the perspective of immigrants, like just a very like deeply first-person narrative, so that it's like if you were sitting on the other side of the aisle from maybe where I sit, you would maybe not be turned off or maybe not be put off because you don't feel like somebody's preaching to you. You feel like they're telling you their story, and actually maybe it feels a little bit similar to your own story. That was kind of the goal in the approach. So I interviewed my family, who are first generation immigrants to this country, and I learned a lot about their experiences, both in coming here as like these like starry-eyed kind of immigrants, which I think is very much like the dream of the nation, and then how that morphed into this like notion of, I guess we kind of call it hazing. Do you know what I mean? We've had this thing after 9/11, that quote was in there. It's like we've had this thing where Muslims or brown people are kind of vilified or profiled, but that's been a trend in our culture, whether it was Italians or it was Irish or it was just throughout history. That's been a thing. The most recent immigrant kind of gets the flack after an event, and kind of finding the unity in that, and hopefully some hope and joy and levity in the ideal of what America could be, versus where we sometimes live in the reality.
All right, we saw your parents a little bit in that teaser clip. So next to Kieran is Jordan Ching. She's a filmmaker based in the Bay Area. Well, our team had reached out to Van Jones, the CNN contributor, and said we'd really like to do something with you. And Van Jones said, I want Jordan Ching to direct a piece. So Jordan, can you talk about this collaboration?
Yes. So hello everyone. Van approached us and told us that he makes a speech about deep patriotism versus cheap patriotism, and how America's always been two things and not one. It's always been the founding dream, which is about hope and equality, and the founding reality, which is about inequality and ugliness. So we read the speech, and the first thing that came to mind was we have to take a cross-country road trip and show what America looks like, all the people, places, and things, and that's what we did.
So you took a cross-country road trip with Van Jones?
No, not with Van. We filmed Van in LA, and then from there we made our way across the
Skyped
country.
in from there.
Yes.
Terrific. Keith Maitland, sitting next to Jordan, is the director of Tower, one of the 15 films on the documentary shortlist for the Oscar this year. Tower is about the 1966 mass shooting on the campus of the University of Texas, where Keith went to school, although not in 1966. Keith, can you tell us about your piece?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of looking at patriotism and activism and where the two interact and what they mean to each other. The subject of the documentary is a young man named Nate Boyer, who's here with us today. Nate, where are you?
Nate's over here.
You saw Nate up here in the sizzle. And Nate is a veteran. He's a Green Beret veteran who also played college football at the University of Texas years after I went there. And after his time on campus, he went on and made a go at the NFL and has a very unique perspective as an Army vet and a football player. And so when the Colin Kaepernick protest began end of last summer, Nate was approached by the Army Times to weigh in. And Nate did just that. He wrote an open letter to Colin. And he basically said, I don't agree with your tactics so much, but I agree with your right to express yourself in this way. And I look forward to the day when you'll feel comfortable standing again for the national anthem. At that point, Colin reached out to Nate and started a dialogue. And together, the two of them have moved forward a little bit, opening each other's eyes. And our piece looks at Nate and two other veterans who were impacted by Nate's action with Colin. And so it's all about the ripple effects of protest and where that interacts with patriotism.
And our final filmmaker is Jason Cohen. He directed the film Facing Fear, the short documentary that was nominated for an Academy Award a few years ago. His latest feature-length documentary is Silicon Cowboys, a film about the early days of the computer business, which is now on iTunes and Amazon, all those good places. Jason, tell us about your piece.
Sure. First, I just want to also point out Joyce Deep and Owen Shiflett and thank them for bringing us into this project.
They are the producers
of this project, and for Sundance Now to giving us the opportunity to explore this, especially in these times we're in, and especially today, and with what's happening. I'm speaking on behalf of all the filmmakers. Sorry. My idea for this film when I first spoke to them was a little different from what it ended up being, and that was because we started talking about this in October, and things were different then. They were a little different then, but certainly the country was divided. When they came to me with this idea about patriotism, one of the first things I thought of, well, what could an audience relate to? What symbol is something that you can just always relate to, and visually what would work? And I was just drawn to the flag, and what is held in that meaning of the flag, and it holds so much meaning for so many different people in so many different ways. So we started exploring ways we could look at the flag and what it means to different people, and had a few ideas and started going down one road. And then we had a conference call scheduled for November 9th, and we were all in sort of disarray, and it was a pretty emotional call. And I basically said, and they agreed, that things have to, like the tone of this has to change. We have to look at this differently. So I was really keen on trying to do something that had some balance to it, and not just propaganda and showing one side of what the flag means. And I really wanted to show a balance of what the flag means to some people here and some people here, and not just blue and red state. I just wanted to get beyond the politics of it. So we started down that road, and then I guess you could call it a gift. On November 29th, I woke up, and I don't actually do a lot of Twitter, but I happened to look, and our president-elect at the time tweeted that he thought flag burners should be put in jail or their citizenship stripped. So I called back up and said, I have to change the film again. So I made a film about flag burning, and that was the impetus for it, and it gave it some reason to really explore it because it was suddenly very timely. And so what I did was, again, I still wanted to show a balance. I reached out and was lucky enough to be put in touch with Gregory Joey Johnson,
who is the Johnson in the Texas versus Johnson Supreme Court case that made flag burning legal in 1989 after he burned a flag at the 84 Republican Convention. He's still an activist. He's a revolutionary communist, and he's very outspoken. He's been out. He was arrested at the Republican Convention this year. And he's still out there doing it, and at the Democratic Convention as well. And so I told his story, and then I wanted to balance it. So we reached out to a Gold Star family who you saw in the sizzle there, whose son was killed in Afghanistan, and who have very different feelings about the flag and what it means to them. I had this idea of bringing them together for a dialogue, which I have to say they were keen on it before I even proposed it, even though I had it in mind. So we did bring these two sides together for a dialogue, just to discuss how they feel and understand who each other are.
Now, I want to get at this big concept of patriotism that the Sundance Now team came up with and then brought to all of you filmmakers. And I'm wondering, when you heard this idea, what your first thoughts were. I mean, I wonder if any of you had given a lot of thought to patriotism before, or was this an opportunity to start thinking about it? And I'll just throw that out to whoever wants to jump on it first. Kieran.
I never really considered, to me, patriotism has such a connotation of it just has this, it's a word that I associate with propaganda and people just hawking bullshit at you. That's what it is from my, that would have been my preconceived notion. And so I thought it was really interesting to be but no, we all live here. I'm a citizen. I've grown up here since I was 5 years old. I'm proud of this country. So understanding that you can kind of reappropriate that term and kind of make it what it is to you, and I guess take some ownership over the notion of it. It doesn't have to be what somebody else said. It can be, you can start to reappropriate what that experience is and start to put a series of different narratives out there about what might get associated with this word. Good?
Anyone else want to? That was good, Kieran.
All
Gold
right.
star.
I'll jump in. I'll say, I grew up here in the U.S. I consider myself a patriot, and I've never seen it as a bad word, but I've also never accepted it as a word that is owned by any side of the political spectrum or any side of the approach to, quote unquote, what America is. I've always lived in communities, for the most part, that are people of all different backgrounds, and I appreciate what they bring to our country. I think of the Statue of Liberty and that bring us your tired, your poor, as kind of the ideal of what America is about. And so, to me, patriotism is about reaching out, and it's about inviting people in and being a part and making your own way, expressing yourself. I think after 9/11, there was a real twist on that patriotism was displayed in certain ways, and if you didn't display it, whether you hung a flag on your house or presented yourself in certain ways, you weren't as patriotic as others. But that's never felt right to me. And I feel like as filmmakers, we get the opportunity to express ourselves in so many ways that it hadn't ever occurred to me to express patriotism before, Zach and Owen and Joyce talked to me about it. But it's an exciting opportunity to kind of contextualize what this word means, because it means different things to different people. But to me, it's a word I'm comfortable with, and a word I'm proud to, it's a mantle I'm proud to carry.
For me, it's a word that's a very difficult word. I'm very uncomfortable with it at times in my life, especially, I think, after making films both in, after making Control Room, we opened it, it was about the media coverage of the Iraq War, but was centered in Al Jazeera station, and we showed it in the US, and I was on radio shows where they said, this is anti-American propaganda. How could you show these soldiers that have been captured by Iraqi troops? This is disgusting. And I got the same thing when I made The Square, because from the Egyptian, it was banned in Egypt, and You're showing the military in a bad light. You're unpatriotic, and so I've definitely been labeled unpatriotic by both countries that I hold a passport for. So it has been a really difficult word that I've struggled with. And now, living in these times with Trump and with Brexit, it's, you start thinking about this. And this is why I loved this concept of the global patriot, because it really, really had me thinking, well, this is actually what I stand for. And what does that mean? And how can I best express this in a film? So yeah, I'm very excited to see all of your pieces, because I think it's a very complicated word for me. I mean, after September 11th, even my mother had said something to her brother. She's from Indiana, and she said something to her brother about how we need to be thinking about our foreign policy. And he called her unpatriotic and did not speak to her for a year. So, it's a difficult word.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, for me, part of it was exploring when and how did this word patriot become inflammatory. I grew up in a typical I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and we said the Pledge of Allegiance, and we put our hand, up here, and we did that, and that was the norm. That doesn't happen as much anymore, obviously, and we live in a different time. But for me, it was exploring that, and in making this film, it certainly caused me to think. And Joey, who's in my film, he says, patriotism means love of country and putting your country first. And he says that's very dangerous. And it's sort of off of what Jahan is saying here, the idea that our country is better than yours. And as a result, we're going to use what we think is the right way to do things, and that's how you should also follow our lead. And that kind of opens up a rabbit hole that you maybe don't really want to go down. So I was, and I thought about that a lot, but then I had this family whose son died doing what he thought was fighting for all of us here in this room, and truly believed that. And I couldn't sit there and look at this family and tell them that, although Joey did. Joey told them, I think your son's life was used by this system, by the American system that says you're going to protect this country when in fact you're going to increase the reach of this country, which is a little bit different. So I struggled in making this film, and it definitely opened my eyes to what I'm doing. I'm a parent also, so it affects a lot of what I do, and it certainly is affecting how, when I look at my kids now, I'm certainly thinking about a lot more of these issues that I always thought about, but it sort of definitely has caused me to really think about what it means, what this word means.
I mean, everyone said everything, but my family's originally Palestinian, so there's never been when you're a patriot and you're Palestinian, it's not like there's a land for you to be patriotic towards. So when you say love of country, that means love of people, and the people of Palestine have no agency in their country. So when you start to see the American government, by no means am I saying these are equal at all, but when people don't feel like they own the country, meaning the government, then it becomes a question that I thought was interesting of, how can you be a patriot when you don't feel like you're a part of the system that runs the country? And then I kind of got into the money and politics world in that way, which is also interesting because it is love of country, but then it's what is a country? Is it the land, or is it the government, or is it the people? And what happens when those three things aren't together, which is most of the time.
I'm going to say I didn't think a whole lot about it before this film, but traveling across the country, it made me feel a little bit better, especially after Trump won. We came across a lot of Trump supporters, and it didn't really matter if you're blue or red or Republican or Democrat. I felt like the consensus that we met was that people just want to do better. They want to do better for themselves, for their communities, for the country. So it made me feel a little bit better, just knowing that a lot of people share the same sentiment, regardless of what your views are.
So we've talked about the content of these pieces. I want to talk about the form of these pieces in the short form. Several of you have made short documentaries before, although when we talk about short, your films are probably more like 25 minutes. Or the brief for these are to make them a little bit shorter and punchier. And I wonder what you see as the challenges and the opportunities of that form.
I mean, I I love short films. I work at Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, and I make the field pieces, and they're so much fun, and people watch them, and people learn and engage. I think it's very hard to get someone to sit down and watch 90 minutes if they don't already agree with you, and it is not that hard to do it if it's short. So if you're trying to I think of short films as like gateway drugs. Like, you know, like, try this. Oh, you like it? There's more over here. Which is really, really powerful. And I think there's space for feature films and short form things. But, you know, people, I think short films have a bad rep. But they're hard because you have to be concise, you have to know what you're saying, you have to have a point of view, and you have to do it all really fast, and you have to keep people entertained. And I think it's a fun challenge, and I think it does a big service for feature films, because if you get someone interested, then maybe they'll go watch The Square, you know, and that would be that's great. I want everyone to watch The Square, you know what I mean? But maybe they wouldn't just be like, you know what, it's Wednesday, should I watch The Square or should I watch Superman? They're gonna pick Superman most of the time.
Jahan, I mean, given that you've really worked a lot in long form with The Square and Control Room and these films, what's it like for you to switch to a shorter format?
Oh, it's exciting. I like to have those limits, actually. And I think that it pushes you to be creative in dealing with those limits. And in terms of the release of it, you know, it's very exciting to be working on something for a month or two and actually have a finished product when you're used to working on something for 3 years or more, you know. And then with people's attention span now, I think that it's exactly like you said, it's very difficult to get somebody to sit down for an hour and a half when they have no interest in the topic. So much easier for people to take 4 minutes out of 5 minutes out of their lives.
And that's not a question everyone has to answer if anyone has anything they want to add.
Well, I'll just add, I mean, I've made short films, and like you said, they're usually back in the 20-minute range. And this just takes a lot more discipline. I mean, it's in a way, it's a lot tougher. I've made feature docs as well, and in a way, it's a lot tougher. I mean, you really have to figure out what has to go, and that's one of the things as filmmakers we hate. You know, what has to go in that final cut. And with this, you're getting rid of things that you would normally keep. And I think some of the things like character development, in 5 minutes, it's tough to really develop a full character and have an arc of your story. So it's really tough. I think in the end, it's fun and it's satisfying. And I think, you know, sort of what they're saying. But I will say, I think we're at a time right now where shorts are burgeoning. And if you look at Field Division and if you look at OpDocs, people want shorts. And unfortunately, it is because of these attention spans, and it's because people are watching them on their iPads and their cell phones. But I'm excited to do more shorts. And you know, it is a way to get eyeballs on your work. And that's what we all want in the end, I think.
If people don't know the things that Jason is referencing, Field Division is the group that Laura Poitras, who made Citizen4, started with others. They put out some terrific shorts on fielddivision.org, and New York Times OpDocs, that's been at this for a few years, has made a lot of terrific shorts, and others. The NewYorker.com is putting out more short films. So I think this truly is an exciting time for it. So Jason, alluded to the election of Donald Trump and how that, changed his thinking about this piece. And the film festival I run in New York City, Doc NYC, started 2 days after the election, and we were, constantly in that week talking to filmmakers about what that election meant to them and to their work. And I'd like to hear from you, if that election made a difference in the way you think about your work, and if so, how it's made a difference.
It really impacted me, I think, just because mainstream media always paints this huge division across our country, which, it exists, but I think through this film we explored that at the end of the day, we are all just humans. We're all just trying to get by. We're all just trying to pay our bills. So it opened my eyes, I think, in terms of the way I view the country. And it made me appreciate America in general, that we are Americans and we are a great country because of our differences and not in spite of our differences.
Anyone else? How the election affected their work?
I mean, we talked to a guy from the Tea Party who had a signed constitution of Donald Trump had signed one of his constitutions, and it was like...
He hadn't read it, though, had he?
I mean, can he read? We don't know. I had like a video of him reading Obama's birth certificate as proof. But yeah, the Tea Party guy, I mean, it forced us, like, we all went up there, crew went up there to sit for like 6 hours with the Tea Party guy, and we had to find common ground with this guy. I would have had no interest in doing that if I didn't know I had to do this for the next, hopefully, 2 years, but probably longer. So yeah, I mean, it changed us because we wanted to be a little nicer to him, in the sense that you can't paint them as a bad guy because they're with you, and I don't know if that makes sense, but it changed the lens through which we saw the Tea Party.
I think for me, like the thing that really shifted was the amount of anger and like vitriol that I really felt from so many close friends, and so much the personal affront of something that's so broadly political, and how that one person, there is a trickle-down effect, and that person does affect you, but how you let it affect your emotional state over the course of your everyday life, and the way that people are taking that with them into their day in, day out. And so it's like, how do you have control over that set of your own emotional circumstances? Like, how do you, because that isn't going to be a place from which you can do anything effective. You know what I mean? Like, how are you going to actualize the change that you want to see? How are you going to impact other people once you stop yelling? You know, I think I became very aware, like very acutely aware of how damaging the anger can be. And I know that can also be a source of strength, but it's like how divisive that can be. And so it really redoubled like kind of my interest in being able to bridge a divide, find a way to use like levity, or how can you open people's hearts, you know, with a different set of tactics, you know, whatever that set of tactics is. And that's really, I think, what I've learned through this particular political process.
For me, a lot of my work is historical in nature. And when I pitch my projects, people always say, well, how is a story from 1966 or from 1970 going to be relevant today? And I look them in the eye and I say...
How could a film about mass shooting possibly be relevant today?
Thank you. And I look at them and I say, you know, the past is present, and the political is personal. And I like to tell stories that are about human beings in unique circumstances, but those unique circumstances play out over and over again, and their personal experiences unveil political situations in ideally nuanced ways, in ideally personal ways. And so, as frustrated as some people are about the ascension of Trump, as satisfied as some people are about a new direction for the country, we've been here before. We've been here before, and we will be here again. And so I want to support people who want to rise up and make their voice heard. I want to understand people who see positives in a situation that I have a hard time finding positives in. And I like looking at history for strength in that and for cues as to where we might be going. The flip side of it is just in the last 48 hours, there's been a lot of talk about privatizing public broadcasting, abolishing the NEA and the NEH. And those are things that I take personally, because those are things that impact me as both a filmmaker who relies on public broadcasting a lot of the time, and as a citizen who holds that up as one of the greatest kind of jewels in our crown as an American society. So I'm excited that we have an opportunity to express ourselves as Americans, and I plan on expressing myself a lot.
And I'll just add, I mean, I think we all probably, after the election, had to take a closer look at what we're doing and the responsibility that we maybe have. And for me, it was just sort of looking at all these amazing films, like if you just look at this year, some of these amazing films that talk about injustices in our world. And there was a bit of me stepping back, like, well, a lot of these amazing films have been made for years, but look where it's gotten us. But on the other hand, we need those films. I mean, Jahan made what I consider one of the greatest protest films of all time. If you haven't seen it, you should see The Square, by the way. And we need films like that. We still need films. But on the other hand, I feel like we do need these films, like what these guys were just saying, that do bridge a little bit and don't preach to the choir, this room, and expand out and can get on some other people out there that wouldn't maybe hear about the other side. And we sort of have to figure out a way to do both of those. And I don't know the answer to that yet. And hopefully we'll figure it out.
I want to take a few minutes to take questions from the audience. So if you've got one, do we have a microphone going around? Okay, so we've got a microphone. Before we take our first question, I want to acknowledge Josh Sapan, the head of AMC Networks, whose real vision was Take 5. I remember sitting in a conference room with him a couple years ago, and he said, you know, I think if we could just make these short films, we'd have a way of punching through the noise in a different way, and it's been Josh's leadership that's put the resources behind doing this, so thank you, Josh Sapan. Now, who's got a hand up? And I see a hand up over here. We'll bring you a microphone.
Thanks. My name's Matt Carey with nonfictionfilm.com. One of the things I recall, interesting points Gary Trudeau made about patriotism, and he contrasted his sense of patriotism to conservatives. He said their patriotism is based on hope. Their patriotism is based on pride. Mine is based on hope. So I just wondered if anyone had a comment about that.
So if anyone didn't hear that, Gary Trudeau, the cartoonist of Doonesbury, said my patriotism is based on hope. Their patriotism based on pride. Does that resonate for anyone, or anyone? We can move on if it doesn't. All right, let's take another question. Thank you, though. That was a great quote. Right here, this woman.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm here with California Magazine, but I'm also an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley, which is, as most of you know, I'm sure, a very politically concerned and active student body. And I think a lot of people struggle when Trump supporters tell them, you know, now that he is in the seat of the presidency, it is kind of your duty as a citizen, as a patriot, to get behind him, to support him, to hope that he's going to do what's best for this country. People really have a hard time agreeing with that sentiment. And I was wondering if any of you have a response to it, or advice, or thoughts on that.
Has that come up in any of your interviews? Is how to apply patriotism to getting behind the current president?
I mean, the Tea Party, Russ Thompson with one S, that's how he spells his name, is a Trump supporter, and he kind of lectured my team and I about this. And I don't have an answer, because
Well, did he get behind Obama when Obama was president? Because that's a natural follow-up question.
Well, he says he does, but I don't think he did. So that, like, it becomes like semantics of like, what does get behind someone mean? You know, because they're like, well, we accepted him as president. I'm like, well, I'm obviously also accepting him as president. I'm just not happy about it, like, as you were not happy about it with Obama. So I feel like, I mean, like, just say, yeah, I do accept him as president, and I don't want the country to burn down. But I think that, like, I guess the Tea Party agrees. I guess, I don't know, it was the strangest interview ever. It was very long and strange. But, like, yeah, he totally basically was saying, like, oh, you know, it's your job now, liberals, because we were the liberals, to get behind this platform, as opposed to get behind what's good for America. And eventually, after like 6 hours with him, we were able to get to a place where we were like, can we just agree that we all want what's best? And we moved on from there. So I don't know if that helped. But.
Where is the question that patriotism is about questioning your president as well? I mean, and I think that's what we have to think about.
We pass the microphone to this woman here.
Right there. Hi, I'm Jan Price from the Jan Price Show, all about movies on iHeartRadio. My question is, these are all short. Do any of you want to make them longer documentaries? Because every one of these topics is very, very, very fascinating, and I'd love to hear more about your interview with the Tea Party. You know, and you said spend 6 hours with them, and yet you only have 5 minutes. So I'm curious. Is this spawning, a longer documentary?
You know, when this was brought to me as a short form, I didn't mention it earlier, I've never made a short film before. I've only made feature-length docs, and I think in 90-minute increments typically. I was worried about trying to pack in what's a lot of ideas and a lot of, I think, necessary perspective into a small little vessel like this. I don't have plans to make a longer form documentary about the Colin Kaepernick protest or about Nate's relationship to it, but I would like to inspire Nate to make a long form documentary, and I would be interested in seeing the people at Sundance now, help shepherd that forward, because he's got a very unique perspective, and Colin does too. We weren't able to talk to Colin because it was football season while we were shooting, and he had his eye on the prize. But now that his Sundays are freer, maybe Nate and Colin could get together and maybe co-produce something. I would be interested to see the perspectives on that from their very in the middle of it perspective explored. And so,
Nate, can I ask you to step over here and I'll hand you a microphone? I'd love to hear from your perspective what the experience was being part of this film and speaking out in general around this topic.
It was divisive. Not the film, but the situation. I mean, when I originally wrote the open letter, I didn't think that many people were going to read it, first of all. And then just to see, I think, both sides of the spectrum attack me for what I like to say, sitting in the radical middle, which is the hardest place to be, it seems like, in our country right now, because everyone wants you, a lot of people want you to take a side. And it's actually been really refreshing to hear everybody here not talk like that, But no, I just, as far as patriotism go, I think working on this with Keith definitely opened my eyes up to, a different meaning of the word. And because immediately with my experience, when I think of that word, the image of the flag pops into my head, and images of saluting it, and all these different things. And the one NFL game I got to play in, I broke down in tears when the anthem was playing and the flag was being honored because of my relationship to it. But I've only walked in these shoes. I don't know what it's like to walk in anybody's shoes, your shoes, anybody's. And to keep my mind open in that perspective is definitely changed me over the last few months quite a bit. And it's actually changing my very conservative mother, which is interesting to me, really interesting to me. She actually reached out to me recently about something she'd seen involving the police and an African-American who was a friend of mine. And so it's just, I think that's very cool, and I would love to do that. Yeah, I think it's a great idea. But anyway, thank you.
I may get your mother to talk to my mother. Question right here. Yes, your microphone.
Greg Marks with Media Inc. magazine. Working for him. Anyways, this is to Keith. He said the past is present and the political is personal. And I wanted to know, how do you think that's going to affect the future generation, not the millennials, but the generation after them? Any of you can answer that, actually.
Well, I've got one of those generations after them living in my house these days, and he's only 14 months, so I don't know where he falls on the political spectrum. I have to say, I grew up in a very liberal household, and I never felt I had to make, and I never did make the difficult decision to break from the way I was raised and from the way that I was, potentially even indoctrinated. I don't know. I have a lot of friends who have made that decision, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for them. So when I look to my young son and imagine his future, mostly I hope that he's happy and I hope that he's safe. But I hope that there's a world that he can grow up into where his voice can be heard and where his ears are wide open. I think where we'll be 15 years from now, 25 years from now is up in the air. I know some people, as of the inauguration, started their own doomsday clock, and maybe they don't think there will be a 15 years from now. But I'm an optimist. Like Gary Trudeau, my patriotism is based in hope, and it's based on the ideal that America was designed on. But I never lose track of the fact that we're a nation started by people with great ideas, and then those people, after they finished writing their great ideas on their parchment paper, went back home to their subjugated wives and their slaves and pretended like all men are created equal, didn't somehow include all men, women, and citizens of every stripe. So we have a long way to go. I hope the generation after the millennials and the millennials themselves will pick up the mantle and run with it.
Thank you.
We have time. We'll take one more question. Bring the microphone here.
Hi, I'm Rubina Ramji from the Journal of Religion and Film, a very different outlet. I'm also a professor, so shorts actually work really well in the classroom. Continue making them. We appreciate it. My question is actually about the idea of what it means to be American. I'm Canadian, and when we look at our American neighbors, we look at the idea that to be American does not mean keeping your immigrant identity. It means assimilation. It means being American, giving up all of your different identities. And then when I hear American presidents talk about things like, if you're not with us, you're against us, or creating the axis of evil, to me it sounds like it's saying you can only be American if you're American and you're born in America. So I wonder how that comes out with the idea of being a patriot when, honestly, more than half of the panel up there would be considered not patriot enough to be American.
Well, I think we probably all came from somewhere going back, so probably you could make the argument that all of us wouldn't be considered. But along the lines of what you were saying, Joey Johnson, in my film, talks a lot about this, and it was back to what I was saying before about that danger of being what is considered American and what is best for the country and what is best to put forward from this country, and not recognizing what the country was built on, which is what you're just talking about, and the immigrants that we have here and why that makes this. I mean, I wouldn't agree that everywhere those sentiments are everywhere, obviously. I think they probably do exist, which we've now seen, unfortunately, a little more clear than maybe some of us realized. But I think I'm with Keith where I'd like to be a little bit more optimistic about it. And I do think dialogue is a big part of getting past that. And if you can understand why somebody feels that way, then maybe you can talk to them why your experience is different and why maybe not everyone might not feel that way. So I don't know if that answers it. But.
So the white guys here are feeling optimistic.
I said I'd like to lean towards optimistic.
Silence from this corner.
No optimism at this end?
I feel optimistic. Yeah, I think to be American, it's both. It's a balance of maintaining your identity, your culture, your values, but also adapting to the American lifestyle. So I think it's both. My family's 4th generation, so I consider myself very, very American, but at the same time, I know my roots, I know where I come from, so I think it's a little bit of both.
After the Egyptian Revolution, there was a lot of people self-educating themselves about how things worked, and now, we have all of our television stations are now owned by the army, and where we're not in a great place right now. So I would say maybe the silver lining to this is that people are going to be a lot more aware and really looking and checking and observant as to how things are going to be moving forward, where maybe we would have been less so if somebody else was elected. And, if he fucks up, then he gets the boot, and but people are going to be looking and watching, and I think that's a good thing,
One of the things I loved, like in the cold open of like my film, it's like my dad is like after they got their, they talk about after they got their citizenship, and I was like, oh, what did you do afterwards? Like, did you do anything to celebrate? He's like, oh, we went out to eat, and I was like, oh, did you go to Denny's? Because it's like favorite place in the world is Denny's. He's like, good American breakfast at Denny's. Like he just sat like, beers American. Like he's such a, to look at him, I know that he's not associated with the image of what but it's like in his heart, he's so American. He's so like, and I mean like down home, like barbecues, like let's go to Olive Garden. Like this dude is just like on his own page. Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, and you can be that and also retain, pieces of who you are, and that's what the fabric of a country is. That's what I thought was really exciting about this series. Like that's what I was excited to show. I was like, I know a lot of, like we shot one of the scenes in a Republican's backyard. They gave it to us for a steal because they believed in the premise and they like wanted to see that like idealism represented. Like it's out there in that fabric. So, you know, I was excited that this is an opportunity to share that and that duality.
That sounds pretty optimistic to me.
Yeah. Are you looking for a restaurant chain to sponsor your next film?
That's correct. That's correct. All the sponsors from Olive Garden and Denny's.
I just want to unlimited breadsticks. I just for the whole crew. Like you'd eat that every day. The crew would eat that every day. Unlimited breadsticks and unlimited salad.
It's crafty and the next feature, Doc. Yes.
I just wanted to add one more thing. I think optimism shouldn't be confused with endorsement. I think there's a difference. And you know, Keith was saying people have these doomsday clocks, and I think there needs to be a call to action. I totally agree with that. But I have 2 kids. Am I gonna have a doomsday clock in my house and tell them the world's ending in 15 years? So you better get everything you want to do in now. So that's part of where that lies for me.
Before we wrap up here, a few things. If you've enjoyed this panel, I invite you back on Monday, same place, same time at 1 o'clock. We're doing a panel called Getting Emotional with Documentary Filmmakers. We've got a terrific group of filmmakers who have films here at Sundance, including the filmmaker of Unrest and the filmmaker of The Force and Quest, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about these films as they unspool this weekend. Also, if you like interviews with documentary filmmakers, I invite you to listen to my podcast, Pure Nonfiction. It's free. You can download it on iTunes. My producer, Michael Scotti, over there has some buttons. If you'd like your own Pure Nonfiction button, you can mob Michael after this. And please come check out SundanceNow.com. If you enjoy great independent films and the kinds of voices you've been hearing today, SundanceNow.com is full of them. And as a last piece of housekeeping note, I'm going to turn the microphone over to Danielle.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, everyone on the panel. 25 lucky audience members can reach under their seats and receive a Top of the Lake Season 1 DVD from Sundance TV in anticipation of the upcoming second installment of Jane Campion's story. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all for coming. Please come back Monday. Thanks to the team of filmmakers here.